Hello, this is the NICU Lived Network, and we are your hosts. I'm Melinda.
I'm Nat.
And I'm Emma. We are all NICU mothers using our lived experience to partner with health professionals to impact research, advocacy, and clinical practice.
Each week we will bring you something new. It could be a topic highlight, the latest from research, or ways in which you can use your lived experience within the NICU to impact change. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Well, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of the NICU Lived Network. Hi Em. Hi Nat.
Hello.
And joining us today is a really special guest, Marni Cochrane. Hi Marni.
Hi.
Hey,
So Marni is a mum of twins who developed TAPS during her pregnancy, and we think it's so important to be able to talk to parents about their journey and give that a voice, and also let people know what are different experiences that families go through, and then also how they can use that to give back.
I'm really interested just to know about TAPS because I haven't come across it before either. So yeah, I think it's probably a really good opportunity, I guess, to share a little bit around that and your journey, in relation to it would be great. Because when you Google it, it's very, it's kind of hard to understand what it is, I think. So it'd be great if you could simplify that for us around what TAPS is.
Yeah. So listeners, or you might have heard of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So I guess it's in a similar vein where it's a disease that's caused by the placenta. So wherever there's a shared placenta in a multiple pregnancy, most commonly in twin pregnancies, basically due to the tiny connections in those placentas, the blood flow becomes unequal between the twins. So one baby will become anemic and the other will become polycythemic. So the easiest way to describe that is one baby's blood concentration is too low and the other's is too high, or like pink lemonade and tomato sauce. So that's the consistency of their blood. And as you can imagine, if there's not enough red blood cells or too many red blood cells, they can cause that issue can cause heart failure and other problems. What else can I say about it? So it's blood concentration. So too many red blood cells, not enough red blood cells. So anemic and polycythemic is essentially what happens. Another way to describe it is it's similar with twin-to-twin transfusion. There's a donor and a recipient. So it's like the donor is giving all their red blood cells to the recipient, so they become overloaded with red blood cells, and the other one has not enough because they've given them all away.
And so presumably when you found out you had twins and you found out that they were sharing a placenta, that was TAPS kind of on the cards as something you had to watch out for, or the heads up that could be an issue later down the track?
Yeah, so when we found out, we actually got a call from the professor. So I was getting my scans privately, and the professor of the sonography business called me up personally and said, because I'd only just found out that day. So, and maybe I'll go back to how I found out I had twins. But when I found out that day, the professor called me and said, look, these are the conditions that could happen as a result of a shared placenta. And these are things that we're going to watch out for, but it's most likely that you'll get to 37 weeks and we deliver the babies and they have an uncomplicated pregnancy. So I guess that's what kind of happened. Like I held that in my mind. Oh, like everything's going to be fine because that's what happens. It's one of those things. It won't ever happen to me because these things are quite rare. I think twin-to-twin transfusion, it's something like it can happen in about 15% of shared placenta pregnancies. TAPS is 3 to 5%. Oh, wow. That's how rare it is. So, it's so we definitely went through a couple of scenarios, but just said, it's most likely you'll get to the end of the pregnancy and everything's fine. So I didn't have in my mind that that was a possibility. Yeah.
And so when did you find out you had twins?
Yeah, so just to go back, so my husband and I had been trying for a baby for 7 years, and we didn't realize that we had fertility issues. We just kind of thought that it was my age, because we started, I think, when I was about 35, and didn't realize that he actually had the fertility issue. So, and then COVID delayed things for a couple of years. So anyway, we did IVF. We had one embryo implanted, and so we would never expect that we were going to have twins, even though they warn you that that's a possibility. We just, didn't expect it. And I had 2 scans. So I had my dating scan at 7 weeks, and I had my just 11-week scan, just kind of a routine checkup. And they were just done with my obstetrician. So they were like really, really quick 5-minute scans, make sure the pregnancy is viable, go do your NIP test, that kind of thing. And then I got to the 13-week scan, and the sonographer said, "How many scans have you had before?" I said, "Oh, I've had 2," and told her, the 7-week and 11-week. And she said, "Because there's 2 in there, right?" And I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. I thought it was an icebreaker because I was so nervous. We got pregnant on the first round as well. So I was just incredibly nervous and just so worried. It was real. Everything was so unexpected. And so I thought it was an icebreaker. And she said, "Oh, no, I wouldn't joke about that." And showed me 2 heads on the screen. And so, yeah, I kind of froze.
Wow.
13 weeks is awfully late to find out you've got.
Yeah.
The professor did say that's not the first time it's happened, and it can be quite common in IVF because the obstetricians aren't usually skilled sonographers. They're just checking that everything's okay, and I guess maybe saving you a buck after spending a few $1,000.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so when did you find out that the babies had TAPS, or this was happening?
Yeah, at 22 weeks. So we were having private scans up until 20 weeks, and then finally our referral to the hospital went through, and because of the shared placenta, we were automatically put into maternal fetal medicine. And it was my first scan with them that I found out. So that was really quite scary because the other scans were all fine, and it was so beautiful seeing my babies. They were really active. They were really fun to watch. So it was just not expected. When we walked in that day, we were like, "Oh, everything's going to be fine. Like it's going to be great." We were having such a great time. And the poor sonographer, like, she didn't give any indication that anything was wrong, and was also telling us all the things that were good, like they're measuring this, they're doing really well here or there. And then she kind of left us there for maybe 15 minutes. And I said to my husband, "We've been here for so long. I've got another appointment to go to in the hospital. Can you go and find someone?" And they kept saying, "No, don't worry. It's okay. We'll be in a minute." And so the doctor walked in and again explained all the things that could happen in a twin pregnancy or a shared placenta pregnancy, and kind of went, "Oh, so twin-to-twin transfusion, this is what happens, but you don't have that. And then TAPS, twin anemia polycythemia, we think that your babies have that." So we knew it was serious, because he also mentioned the 3 to 5% of these pregnancies and how rare it was. So we knew pretty straight away that it was a very, very serious situation. Yeah. So it was a very tough day, that one.
Imagine. Yeah.
And then from that, how did they monitor your pregnancy? Like, what's the process once you know that that's happened?
Yeah, so we, I guess they go through options. So there's kind of, with TAPS, it's a fairly new disease, so to speak. So it's only been discovered in the last 15 or 16 years. So they still don't know the best treatment for it. So there's kind of 4 treatment options. One of those is laser surgery, which they know in twin-to-twin transfusion that is the best course of action, because you can cut off the connections in the placenta that are causing that unevenness. So in TAPS, they can do that as well. There's something called expectant management. So that's just waiting and seeing, because TAPS can actually correct itself. The babies can actually adapt to these blood cells, these red blood cells, so they can actually adapt, and sometimes it can be reversed, but that's really rare as well. What else? In utero transfusions, so that's going in and giving the babies a transfusion, or taking blood out from the polycythemic baby and injecting warm saline to thin their blood. And the other option, which is a really sad one to discuss, is selective reduction, which is the nice way of saying it. That it wasn't presented to me like that. They said something different, but because we were 22 weeks, I think the doctor felt like he had to kind of give us that, or say that option as a possibility. Excuse me. So what they said to us was the best course of action for us would be expectant management, or just waiting and seeing, because at that stage it was, I think there's 4 stages, and we were at stage 2, although the babies were really stable and they were very active, so they were quite reassuringly active. So they said, let's wait and see, and we'll scan you weekly. So that's the process. Some hospitals or doctors will choose to scan more than that, but with TAPS it is a slow progression. So they actually know how slow it is, whereas twin to twin, for example, it's like it can happen in hours, but TAPS, they know it's only a transfer of so much blood per day, so they can afford to kind of wait and see a little bit more. So it was excruciating, like going from week to week, not knowing kind of, I guess, what was what we were going to be faced with the next week. They did say to us, you know, if anything happens, if you get the slightest amount of spotting, or you have reduced movement or anything like that, go to the hospital straight away, which we did a lot. We did that a lot. Yeah.
I'm so sensitive to, you know, everything in terms of, you know, how you're feeling, and that's would be really hard to wear every day, every hour of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I was definitely very, I guess, tuned into, once I could feel the babies, I was very tuned into their movements. And thankfully there wasn't a lot of, or maybe not so thankfully, there wasn't a lot of reduced movements during the pregnancy, but I did have other complications during it. So yeah, I was in and out of hospital a lot.
Imagine the stress that you would have been under as well. It's, you know, even pregnancy is anxious time anyway, but knowing that that's happening as well and constantly getting checked must have been quite confronting.
Yeah, I guess I kind of took the positive in that. Like, I was going to see my babies, and the advantage of being scanned so often was that I got to see my babies all the time, which was good. And a lot of people did just want to scan me because they wanted to scan a twin pregnancy. So I had like, I went to my GP one day, and she had like a portable ultrasound machine, and she was just like, oh, let me just give you a scan. And same with my obstetrician, let's just have a look. And, you know, everybody wanted to scan me. And if I went to hospital because I had a bit of spotting or whatever, they'd get that portable machine out and be scanning me straight away. So yeah, I got to see the babies a lot. So I did take the positive, although yeah, I guess it was a very anxious time. You know, I was just always looking for that heartbeat, or those heartbeats, you know. Yeah.
And I noticed in the notes that said that TAPS babies are normally born about 32 weeks, but you got a little bit further than that.
Yeah. So for, I guess, so we were really stable for a few weeks. So kind of we went from week to week. Oh yeah, nothing, it's all unremarkable. The babies are doing really well. It's very stable. I did have a bleed at 26 weeks, like just an unexplained bleed, or they call it antepartum hemorrhage. I had to look that up because they kept saying APH to me, and I'm like, what is that? And I had to stay in hospital for 4 days, but it just resolved on its own. Although I did have a lot of counselling because of the complication. The whole hospital was aware of my situation. So I had like the neonatologist coming down and giving me counselling and giving me handouts about what would happen if my babies were born at 26 weeks. But then there was the other concern, if they're I guess their blood levels, or they were anemic and polycythemic, what kind of treatment they would also need after, and what their chances of survival would be. So that was constantly on my mind. The average gestation for TAPS, twins with TAPS, is 32 weeks, and I think there's a couple of factors with that. It's not like a standard or anything. It's just kind of it gets harder to treat at that point. So there's less room in the womb to kind of treat. So sometimes they're just better out and better off the placenta than in there. So with me, we got extra time. So after my 26-week scare, we got to 28 weeks, and the babies were kind of showing signs of what they call compromise. So we'd reached stage 3, and my anemic baby started becoming very anemic, and she, her heart became enlarged. And so that's a classic sign that they need to do something straight away. And then the polycythemic baby, her liver was starting to show signs of stress, so it was just starting to show changes. So they decided they needed to intervene. Now, I was not a good candidate for laser surgery because of the position of my placenta. And so the options I was given was 2, and that was bringing them out at 29 weeks, which they didn't want to do. They wanted to try and get me a little bit further, or an in utero transfusion. So that's what we did. I can explain that for you if you want, because a lot of people don't actually know what is involved in that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, and I'm just going, how is, like when you mentioned before, like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, I had no idea either. And this is where when I was searching for information, I was like, you find a whole bunch of scientific papers, but no one's actually talking about it.
Yeah.
So they do it in singleton pregnancies a lot, where there's an anemic baby. So basically so I wasn't a candidate for laser surgery because of the position of the placenta. I had an anterior placenta, so it's right in front. So they wouldn't have a good view to cut off any tiny connections. So an in utero transfusion, I was a great candidate for that, because what they do is they go in with a needle into your belly, into the placenta, into the baby's umbilical cord.
Wow.
And with the anemic baby, and this is all just done under ultrasound, with the anemic baby, they transfuse just donor blood, adult donor blood. And with the polycythemic baby, they pull out blood bit by bit, like 5 mils at a time, and replace it with warm saline. So it's really amazing. So the needle is still in there, but they're pulling the blood out and then injecting warm saline into it. So they do one baby at a time. I thought they were going to go with it because someone said, "Oh, you've got needles in your belly, they're sticking out," and I'm like, "Oh my god." So I was awake for the whole procedure. The first one was actually just done in like one of the maternal fetal medicine ultrasound rooms, and they just create a sterile environment, give you some drugs like to stop you contracting, because obviously they're still going into your uterus with a needle. So It's there's
So
high
how do
chance
they go into the baby's not going to move?
they do move. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they can do things like give them sedatives, but they obviously want to avoid that. I think if they're doing laser surgery, they generally will give them some kind of like anesthetic or temporary sedative to stop them from moving. But with me, they can see everything that's going on and they can kind of just stop it at any time because it's just a needle. But yeah, it's quite amazing what they can do. Yeah. Yeah, so that was my husband was there for the first one as well. And the equation is incredible as well. So they actually test the blood in real time. So they have a blood bank there with the adult donor blood, and they test the blood to see how anemic the anemic baby is so that they know the right amount of blood to give that baby. So they're like working out, like this takes about 2 hours, the whole thing from start to finish, but they're working out exactly how much blood that baby needs and how much blood they need to take out of the other one. So we found out on that. It's incredible what they can do. That first transfusion, we found out how severely anemic my anemic baby is, or Poppy. And she was like, I knew at that moment that I'd done the right thing. I was so terrified. But as soon as they said, oh, this is her blood count, and she's very, very anemic, I just knew instantly, like, I've done the right thing. We made the right decision. So after that first one, we got 3 more weeks, which was really good. And then we got to 32 weeks, and my MFM was like, we want to take them out. They're starting to kind of go back. So a transfusion is temporary. If the connections are still there, the same, it can just go back to where it was before, where the blood flow becomes unequal. I was really lucky that it got us that far, to be honest, because sometimes they only last days before like all the new blood is unloaded back to the other baby. So we were really lucky, and they were really, really stable. So at 32 weeks, they were just showing kind of changes again. And my MFM said, we want to deliver them. And I actually got admitted to hospital. And then someone came in and went, oh, we don't have any NICU beds for your babies. And they went, I know, I was devastated because I was just sitting like in the the labor and delivery ward and on bed just waiting to be admitted. And then they said, oh, no, we don't have any NICU beds. So they sent me back to the Mater. So that's where the Mater actually in Brisbane does a lot of in utero fetal therapies. They're incredible world leaders in this stuff. So I was really well looked after. And they sent me back there, and then the doctor said, oh, look, it's not urgent. Let's try another transfusion. And I was just like, I really didn't want to do another one. It was like, it was so nerve-wracking. But at the same time, he said, you know, if we can just get you another couple of weeks or even a couple of days, your babies will be better off for it. So this second one, because of the later gestation, was done in theatre with an epidural, so they could change to a C-section in case the babies became distressed or if something happened, they could just bring them out straight away. I'm pretty sure my doctor, it was Glenn Gardner, who's absolutely amazing, but I'm pretty sure that he hadn't actually done this late of a gestation in twins with the in utero transfusion. So yeah, that's why they decided to do it in the theatre. And we got to 33 plus 6, and so I went home, and he basically said, any day, like you'll probably have the babies any day now, but any day extra in the womb is good. So yeah, so we got to 33 plus 2, and my waters broke, and we found out later it was only one of the baby's sacs had broken. So even though they had a shared placenta, they had their own amniotic sacs, and yeah, one of the baby's sacs ruptured, so my waters broke, and I was admitted for 4 days because I had no other signs of labour. They decided that it was probably due to the in utero transfusions, which is a risk that you take. sacs rupturing. There's all sorts of other risks as well. There's infection risks as well. So, so I was admitted to hospital, given antibiotics, and then one of my babies became distressed and we had to do an emergency C-section. So, 33 and 6 we made it to, which was actually quite amazing. But they did still need NICU because they were low birth weight. So they were still under 2 kilos. So they were pretty small babies for that gestation.
And post-delivery, what would they, I guess, obviously, what resulted, I guess, post-delivery around treatment for both of them? Were there sort of any particular challenges that they had to face within the NICU as well?
Yeah, there was. So we were really lucky. Ordinarily with TAPS twins, they do need treatment for anemia and polycythemia outside of the womb, even if they've had in utero transfusions. I have seen that quite often. But with our girls, they didn't need them. So we were very, very lucky that the girls didn't need any intervention for TAPS. However, the baby whose sac ruptured, Billie, she got an infection. So what happened was, and they're still not quite sure, like we can never be quite sure exactly what happened, but their theory is that my waters broke. I was admitted to hospital. I got an E. coli infection during my hospital stay. So infection got into my placenta. And because her sac was the only one that ruptured, she got that E. coli infection. So they called it sepsis. And they couldn't confirm the presence of meningitis. She had 3 lumbar punctures in the NICU, which was horrible. And it was likely due to her slightly thicker blood. So even though it was in the normal range, because her blood was a little bit thicker, it might have been harder to get that lumbar puncture. And so they just decided to treat as if it was meningitis. So she was on antibiotics for 3 weeks. So her first 3 weeks of life, she had a long line, or they call it a PICC line. So she had that for 3 weeks. So she was quite sick, but she was still quite stable, remarkably. So that was kind of the biggest challenge that we faced. Poppy, the anemic baby, actually came off breathing support within 3 days, which was incredible. She just, because she'd gone from being so anemic, like incredibly, like to the point of if we hadn't treated when we did at 28 or 29 weeks, she may not be here. It was just amazing to see just how she bounced back. Like she just started kicking goals. She was breastfeeding, I think, by day 4, or attempting to. Whereas, little Billie was still quite sick, and she actually took almost 2 weeks to come off breathing support. They're probably that's probably the biggest challenge we faced. Also because we birthed from home. So I keep saying we. It's all about we. It's like me, my husband, and my babies. So I had to actually stay at a Ronald McDonald house so that I could, because we were at the Mater. So I had to stay at a Ronald McDonald house and then travel to and from the NICU, and we were always trying to get the babies back to the Gold Coast, but they had a challenge with NICU beds, like having enough. So eventually when we were transferred back, they went into special care but high dependency unit. So I guess because of Billie's long line, she needed, they need to do things and administer the antibiotics twice a day. So we did have a couple of challenges there. Poppy ended up having, what do they call it, like bradycardic and desaturation, bradydesat. Yeah. And a couple of times she needed stimulation, which was really, really scary. That was really scary to watch. And interestingly, so the girls were actually in separate cots at the Mater, And at one stage, they weren't even next to each other. There was another couple of babies in between them. But actually, when they got back to the Gold Coast and they had a shared cot, that's when Billie started kind of perking up and feeling better and trying to breastfeed and coming off breathing support. So once they were reunited, that's where they started really kind of becoming aware and blossoming and starting to kick goals. So it's I just wish that there were twin cots everywhere.
Nat, did they do that with your boys? Were they ever?
No, they didn't. Like, it just, you kind of go, oh, that would have been nice, but they never did. But yeah, you listen to those really lovely stories about how, you know, there's been one twin that's a bit sickly and the other one that's doing well, and they put them together, and then suddenly, you know, the sickly twin turns.
Yeah, and that's what happened with Billie. It's like as soon as she was next to her sister, she kept pulling that CPAP out. She was just, I mean, she was pulling out cords and stuff, but this was like, really, no, I don't need it anymore. And sometimes I'd walk in and she'd probably had it out for a while.
She was ready.
Yeah, she was ready. And I kept saying to them, she's ready, like, you know. Actually at the MARTA, she wasn't regulating her temperature on her own, so she was on a heated, they kept trying, and her temperature would dip. So as soon as she was in the cot next to her sister, her temp was fine.
It kind of makes sense. It's almost like permanent kangaroo care against someone that they've just spent their entire womb life next to. Because we know that the benefits of kangaroo care are less infections, you know, it regulates your temperature, your heart rate, your breathing, like all of those benefits. You don't need a study, like it just almost makes real logical sense. Put them together.
I know. And there's things that I would want to change. I guess it was all a big whirlwind, but yeah, I mean, I would have loved that skin to skin initially, which I didn't get. And I'm seeing
either of them.
Sorry,
you didn't get that with either of them.
Not after they were born. They were taken away straight away to NICU. So there was no skin to skin until maybe it was at least 12 hours after. Yeah. And it was tough because, you know, they were in different areas of the room. So it was one and then the other. I'd have to look at the timestamps of my photos, but I'm pretty sure the first one was at least 12 hours after. Yeah.
It's hard, yeah.
Have you met any other families that have gone through the same thing? Like, I know it's really rare, but have you been able to meet other families?
Not in person, but definitely online. I've found a few, which is really good. So there is a TAPS support forum on Facebook, and that's where I went straight away because they had, I went to the website and then found the Facebook from there. And there's quite a few in Australia, which is really good. And it's actually run by a Brisbane mum. She's now living in the Netherlands, which is really good because she's really close to all the research for it. So there was a few there. There was like a Brisbane family after me that reached out to me personally. So I do talk to a couple of families online, which is great. I'd love to do a TAPS meeting in person, which would be fantastic. But yeah, there are a few around. There was a lady who had the first in utero transfusion, I think it was 7 years ago, for her twin girls, and that was in Melbourne. So there's only 2 hospitals in Australia that do them. It's in twins. Monash in Melbourne and MARTA in Brisbane are the only 2 hospitals in Australia. And it was a lady who had, 7 years ago, her 2 girls had several in utero transfusions, but they still came at 28 weeks. So that was really lovely to speak to her.
Yeah. And only 7 years ago was the first
in Australia.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. So in utero transfusion in Australia for twins. So yeah, they do them in singletons, but and when we're talking about twins, we're talking about not just the transfusion part. We're talking about the partial exchange transfusion where they take out the blood as well. That's usually not done from my understanding, it's not normally done until babies are out of the womb, because they're not sure, like there's not a lot of research into that and how much it helps.
Mm-hmm.
Since your experience, have you found that there's been more kind of general or kind of parent-friendly information about TAPS, or more information for families about TAPS?
Probably not. There hasn't been, like, since I guess, when did I find out? Maybe March last year.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been really anything new that's come out. Yeah, they're still kind of trying to research, what the best treatment is. So there still is a lot of confusion when you see parents that are new to TAPS or have just found out that they're new to TAPS. They'll jump on the forums and kind of be like, I don't know why they're not giving me laser surgery, or I don't know why they're not doing this, because there's just a lot of confusion about the treatments. And because it is rare, there's, so many challenges there about, how much research can you actually do? There's not many of these families that are going through it. So, yeah.
I was just going to ask how Poppy and Billie are going now.
Yeah, they're really good. So we have one kind of thing left over from the TAPS, which is Poppy has a permanent hearing loss in one of her ears, and that's quite common in TAPS donors or the anemic baby. Usually it's a profound deafness though, although I'm seeing more and more that there are these mild permanent hearing losses as well. So that will be an ongoing thing for her. But she still does hear well, like she jumps and, it's quite mild, which is good. What else? So I think that's the only thing left over from the TAPS. There is a lot of research that says that they could have neurodivergencies. It's quite common for them to have, especially TAPS donors, again, the anemic one, to have autism or ADHD. So that will be kind of later. But for the moment, they're doing really well. And then we're just, I guess, with their prematurity. So we always go on their corrected age. So they were still 6 weeks premature. But their growth is on par with a normal 7.5-month-old.
Wow.
They're little chunky monkeys. So they do love to eat, which is really good. And they seem to be doing really well. We actually have a neonatal clinic tomorrow. So we're still with the hospital. We're still in the neonatal